There are few things harder in life than losing a loved one who is still alive. Either they refuse to communicate with us, or we have to create boundaries to protect ourselves. There is no closure. There is this constant reminder in our lives of this absence. There is feelings of regret, confusion, self-blame and guilt, wondering if we're doing the right thing, if we're too hard. And so finding peace is incredibly difficult. Welcome to Path to Peace with Todd Perlmutter. I'm your host, Todd Perlmutter. Our world is a projection of our collective consciousness. The more peace we bring into our lives, the more peace we bring into this world. So let the transformation begin. It truly is one of the hardest experiences any of us will ever go through. It's like having an open wound that just won't heal. Our friends and family aren't really supportive or understanding of this kind of loss. And on top of all of these feelings of regret and questioning, we still have to grieve these people while they're alive. Deal with that question of, is hope something to hold on to? Is it going to make it more painful? Is there any chance of another person evolving, healing, changing, showing remorse, showing a new level of awareness for the harm they've caused? And sometimes when there is a rift, it is often the space, the distance, the time of separation that becomes a new injury, where we're left wondering, how could you have not cared for so long? And every day, you don't get that phone call, you don't get that apology, you don't get any recognition of the harm and damage they've caused, is another day that wound gets deeper and deeper. But healing is possible. A brighter future is available to us. And part of the way we get there is to remember that separation had a reason. It had a purpose. And that our suffering comes from our attachment to a past that no longer exists, to a hope and expectation and desire that is unfulfilled. We wish we had those people in our lives who we can talk to, who can share our burden, help us get through difficult times, who we had some fond memories with. We only have loss with the people we love. When a total jerk removes themselves from our lives, there's no suffering. It's just these people we loved so much that their absence hurts us so much. And while we wish that we had that support, that companionship, while we wish things could be the way they were, they are not that way anymore. And we have to remember the new reality is that for some reason, either they committed some harmful act and we have to protect ourselves. Perhaps they feel that way about us. there is now this new reality. There is a divergence that took place, and this is the new reality. And we have to accept that. We have to be able to let go of what leaves our lives. We have to remember that there is a purpose here. You know, the more we remember how things have changed, we will stop clinging to how things were. Maybe we caused some harm. Maybe someone else cut off communication with us. We have a lot of power to mend that relationship. Sometimes our egos get involved, and sometimes we feel justified in what we did. And in that instance, we made a choice, a conscious choice, that separation was better for us, for them, for who we are in this moment. And so we need to keep making the best of every moment, not trying to change the moment we're in, but to accept it and make the most of it so that the next moment can be even better. If the separation happened because of something we did, and we have tried to mend that relationship, my advice is to keep trying, to never give up on people. So often, these cherished, priceless relationships, when they get damaged, the other person may be very cruel, may be very hurt and rejecting of our attempts. But simply by keeping those attempts going, show our care and can eventually tear down those walls they've put up brick by brick. If a relationship is worth saving, if you have tried to reconcile, never stop trying. You know, you don't have to keep hope alive and allow for that to be torn down and to be shattered every attempt. But we can always do everything we can with inner peace, without expectation, without putting blame on ourselves. We can dissolve that ego. We can show up. We can take responsibility in a way that doesn't keep opening that wound. Part of human nature is to separate from someone, to see what a relationship meant to them, to see how much care and energy they can put into repairing the damage they've caused. So never give up on someone. Never stop caring, showing love. And over time, I have seen relationships that have been strained and estranged for 10 years, where both sides really have given up. But one side never stopped apologizing, never stopped reaching out. And now they are one big happy family again. Sometimes a person didn't even do anything wrong, and they're being blamed for something, and the other party separates. I would even encourage in those times for dissolving the ego. And even if you find you did nothing wrong, even if what you did was justified, relationships are a priceless thing. They don't have to be perfect. And they can be messy. They can be difficult, but they are still important and make life worth living. And even in those situations, we can apologize for how our actions may have hurt the other person. Sometimes a relationship is more important than the ego feeling justified, feeling righteous and superior. And when we can set that aside and just come to the table, like every country who's been at war and found a peaceful solution, we can do this in our own lives. So that is the example of a separation, a loss of a living loved one that we have some control over. The other two scenarios are when someone has separated from us for no reason, maybe for a reason. We have tried countless times and we're still trying to reconcile, and we're just getting no response. It happens all the time. And the other scenario is when someone has hurt us so much, they refuse to acknowledge what they've done. They do not take responsibility for their actions. They have made very half-hearted attempts to apologize, or no attempts to seek forgiveness, to undo the damage, to show they understand the harm they've caused, to repair the relationship, and to assure us that they won't do it again. These are the situations where there's a spiritual solution. We've already tried everything we can do. If the other person is separated, we call, email, knock on their door, try everything we can. And in the other scenario, we've tried communicating what went wrong, what they did, how they can fix it, and nothing gets through to them. And here, we really have to allow ourselves to grieve, to accept the new reality, to grieve like we would a loved one who passed, to realize we may have to do it alone because society does not recognize this kind of grief. And whereas when we do lose a loved one who passes, the whole, neighborhood and friends and family come out to support you. But this is one we have to go through alone. And it's very difficult. And every TV show and movie with a loving family just reopens that wound and reminds us of that relationship we lost. This is something I have gone through personally myself, as some family members stole from me, swindled me out of money. Some stole my wife's jewelry and other valuable possessions that were kept at their house for safekeeping. And, they just refused to give the stuff back and kept justifying why they took it. And the relative that swindled me literally blamed me for trusting him. These were some of the closest people in my entire life who I have wonderful memories with, who weren't perfect, but they're family. And it's been the hardest experience of my life to go through this transitional period. But at the end of the day, all we can do is thank people for showing us who they are. Be grateful that we don't have those kinds of people in our lives who would take advantage of us. Be grateful that we saw who they were before they really had a position to harm us. You know, as we get older, as we have more money and more fine things that people can steal, we can be grateful that the damage was minimized, that whenever it does happen, that it happened sooner than later. And we keep that door open. We keep hope for change alive without clinging to that hope, without letting it pull us up when we need it in a way that can let go and drop us, and we feel that pain all over again. We stay mindful of those triggers that show us we still have some grieving to do. We still have some things to feel through and to process. That there is still some of that tense, blocking energy within us that is causing us pain because we're clinging on to the past and desires that we haven't fully been able to let go of. And most importantly, we meditate on love and kindness when we are able to, not forced, not when we're really angry, but when we have a moment of strength, we send loving kindness to these people. We send that forgiving energy, not for them, for us. Because holding on to that anger and hatred destroys us. There's no better revenge than letting them leave your mind, than allowing yourself to have a great life, to be happy, and for that pain to eventually become inconsequential because we are able to expand our awareness, our consciousness beyond those thoughts of anger, revenge, hatred, betrayal, and they become insignificant because of the distance that we can create with those thoughts, because we can expand our awareness so far beyond those tiny little thoughts. You know, it's the difference between watching or listening to something with our full attention and we're fully engaged trying to understand it versus background chatter at a restaurant that we pay no attention to, that doesn't even register in our conscious mind because we have no interest and we're not focusing on it. I know that in our modern society, there's a lot of content out there that tells us to cut every negative person out of our lives. But we all have negativity within us. We all have bad days. And that only leads to us living alone. And I will always be a believer in the power of forgiveness, the power of our evolution to be able to handle people in our lives who don't act always the way we think they should or that we would. That we can recognize that we choose our emotional reactions, that we create our emotional state, and that it is no one else's fault, and that we can sit in a chaotic, messy family with peace and love. That they only trigger what we have inside of us. and that these relationships, these lifelong bonds, are worth fighting for. And in the situations where we have to remove ourselves, they're even worth waiting for. It may never happen. The day may never come where they apologize, where they give your stuff back. But I can end the conflict within me. We can all end the conflict within ourselves. It takes two for conflict. And when we dissolve that ego, when we transform the anger and hatred through love and forgiveness, our conflict ends. So allow yourself the time to heal. Allow yourself to truly grieve. Don't fear those negative thoughts and emotions. Welcome every single wave of difficult, disturbing, and heavy emotions, and allow them to leave as well. And know that every wave is one wave sooner to a calm, still lake. These are just mental and emotional ripples in that calm, peaceful lake. And they are not bad. They're not unbearable. They're just the passing of the storm, the changing of the seasons. We can welcome all the weather. We don't have to cling to those still, quiet mornings. We can accept it all. They're just thoughts. They're just subtle changes in our physical state. The more we go through those inner mental storms, the more we realize how we fall into those stories of pity and victimhood. And we can, from observation, from allowing all of that, not avoiding it, not fighting with it, we can begin to shift those thoughts to remembering how this new reality is opening new doors, creating space for newer, different, more exciting, and ultimately more loving and mutually beneficial, conscious relationships. Sometimes we do have to shed old relationships, what isn't serving us, unkind people. And it may be a very difficult process, but it always leads to growth. The snake sheds its skin because it's growing, evolving, adapting, and so do we. And even though it may not be the future we imagined, it may be even better. And we just have to keep our eyes open to see it. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Path to Peace with Todd Perlmutter. Thank you to everyone who supports this podcast at eastwesticism.org, who supports this work, who helps make sure that the microphone's powered on and these messages are able to reach the people who need it most. We're all going through a lot, and I hope these words can reach the people who need it and provide some help, relief, and hope in these very interesting times. Thank you so much again. Much love. Is there more to this universe than science can show us? Is there anything mystical or miraculous in the remote corners of the earth that I could see with my own two eyes? My newest book, Aloneness to Oneness, is that journey of discovery. From the rebellious kid who rejected it all, to the adult searching for something deeper, to the person I am today. It is all of the stories, wisdom, lessons, insights, and inspirations I gained on this adventure. If you've ever questioned, doubted, or wondered about the meaning of it all, this book is for you.